podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hola, buenos dias, and that's all the Spanish I have for you. Some of that might not even have been Spanish, but welcome back to the Love Tennis podcast, where I have returned from my travels. It was nice to hear last week George and Calvin show just how much they listen when I talk, when they couldn't even work out where I had gone on holiday, but they had at least noticed that I wasn't there. I'm James Gray of inews.co.uk and the I newspaper. Tennis writer George Belshaw is with me. We're going to be joined a little bit later on by tennis coach Calvin Betton, of course, our regular resident coach. We're going to be going through all the biggest storylines from the last week of tennis. Also looking forward to a really great start to the American hardcourt season. And I'll be catching you up, maybe, if you have time, on a little bit of my travels around northern Spain, southern France, and weirdly Scotland. But that's quite enough of self-indulgent holiday chat for the moment. I would instead like some self-indulgent review chat. Now, as you know, we really like it when people leave us reviews on iTunes, on Spotify, although you can't do a long review there. Sometimes people just tweet saying, I really like Love Tennis Podcast, and that makes us very happy as well. But please do, if you have an Apple device, go leave us a 5-star review. Say something nice about the podcast. It helps other people find us. The more people that listen, the more podcasts we can do. That's the very straightforward thing about this game. The more we do, the more you do, the more we do. And it just goes on like that. And eventually, George and I will just be podcasting about 18 hours a day. I've realised that is the natural end to this. We haven't had any reviews this week. That's why I'm talking about it so much. But please do. Even 80s Villager, who usually leaves us a review a week, which I don't think 80s Villager knows I can read every review, but it just deletes on the system and it all just logs. But I look forward to seeing what 80s Villager has to say about us this week. If you want to send us an email, by the way, if you don't want to put what you think about the podcast out there, if you've got like negative stuff to say, please do email us, lovetennispod@gmail.com. I say that because basically, if you stick a review on that's negative, that's there forever. And like even 2 or 3 years later, when we're doing things differently and we've changed and grown because of what you said, that review's still there. So drop us an email. We love hearing from people. We do try really hard to make this podcast your podcast. And so we really do appreciate when you let us know what you think, what you like, and what you don't like. We've had a couple of emails over the last couple of weeks, which I am going to catch up on over the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to try and do a mailbag episode, basically, when we go through lots of them, because most of it is like, what does Calvin think about this?
Does no one care what I think about it?
George, if I answer that honestly, you're not going to like the answer. So, yes, there's also lots of people asking what George thinks about things. I can assure you no one cares what I think about things.
As a challenge for someone this week to write an email asking something that I specifically...
They want to, specifically know. George is an Aston Villa fan, if that maybe colours what you think about him or things you need to know about. It might be something he knows a bit more about than tennis. Anyway, that's quite enough of that. Let's move on to the real action. We've got loads of things to talk about this week. We're going to talk about Nick Kyrgios. We're going to talk about doubles. Talk about Alex de Minaur, Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, Venus Williams, Serena Williams, Emma Raducanu, Dmitry Tursunov, not a name I thought I'd be saying this week, Jack Draper, Carl Edmund, Daniil Medvedev, Cam Norrie, Coco Gauff, Garbine Muguruza, even Bianca Andreescu, and Ash Barty. Anyway, we'll start with Nick Kyrgios, everyone's favourite, or at least everyone's second favourite, or maybe most hated, depending on where you are player. He has had an eventful week. He signed up for singles and doubles in Atlanta. He pulled out of singles, but did not pull out the doubles, and consequently won the title with Thanasi Kokkinakis, the Australian Open doubles champions. They're heading to New York at the end of this month to play doubles there. They're hoping to pick up their second Grand Slam title, and they beat Piers and Kubler in straight sets in the final in Atlanta. George, I know you're a big Nick Kyrgios fan, and I know there are many more of you than there were maybe even 3 months ago, I would suggest. But weird to pull out the singles and then play the doubles, isn't it?
Well, I guess there's a degree more loading. So it was a knee problem, wasn't it? So that, you're probably loading a lot more in the singles in terms of kind of getting up and down relentlessly, even if he's maybe not the biggest grinder on the ATP tour. So yeah, I mean, I can kind of understand that. I mean, he and Thanasi play a pretty quick game. There's got huge numbers of extensive rallies in their kind of styles, and I think it's good that you've got two recognised singles players playing doubles together regularly at a high level. I do think that is adding something else, and it'd be nice at the end of the season if you had these guys in the doubles, because that naturally would bring more attention to it, to be honest. Kyrgios has obviously reached the final of Wimbledon, but he's not going to be at the ATP finals because he didn't get any points for it. But he's got a decent chance of making the ATP finals if they do well at the US Open.
So am I right in saying that, is it like the singles where if you're a Grand Slam champion as a pair and you're in the top 20, then you get in? Is that right? That's certainly what the singles is.
I believe so, yeah.
And in fairness, they are currently 6th in the race, like Kokkinakis and Kyrgios. So they are on track to make the ATP finals on points merit as well. And you think if they win a couple of rounds of the US Open as well, you would think they're pretty much guaranteed a place. Like I said, I can't even really see them dropping out of the top 20, so they'll probably get in anyway. But yeah, which would be positive, because I also think the World Tour finals, I don't know whether this is just like because I live in London and they were in London, but they felt like less of a big deal in Turin. And again, maybe that's just really like narrow-minded of me, but I felt definitely a bit less interested in them. I don't know how you felt about that, George.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult, isn't it? Because I mean, it's hard for me as well, because that was an event I had been to for 5-6 years in a row, and obviously didn't go last year. So in terms of it being quite a big deal in my own personal life, having spent every waking hour down at the O2, basically, it was a bit of a weird feeling. But I also think there is something about kind of moving to a new venue, taking a new event. It does take a bit of time for it to grow in, I would say. I wouldn't say London was perfect when it started. It really kind of grew into itself as an event. And, even when it wasn't like the best players really performing at its peak in kind of the latter years, I would say, like it still as an event was very slick, very well done, which does bring a lot. I'm not saying it isn't well done in Turin, but they'll develop their own style and put their own stamp on it, I'm sure. And
you don't really have like those, I hate the phrase legacy fans, but with the O2 Arena and the ATP World Tour Finals, a certain percentage of the fans in that room would have been there last year and would have gone, it was actually really good. It was a bit spenny, but, it was good fun. Let's go again. Let's take a few mates. Let's tell a few more people. Like that. Like if you get a good event going, you do kind of snowball your fans a bit. So, yeah, as you say, I suppose new events always take a bit of selling. Unless you're like Mexico, who just appear to get a new event and sell it out immediately and are like, yeah, great, okay, we'll do this more often.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that was the big argument, taking it away from Europe in many sense and kind of taking it to a new country. And that worked really well with the WTA finals last year, as you kind of alluded to with Mexico there. The bigger challenge, of course, being that the tour kind of finishes in Europe and these players are being really dragged all over the world all year. And their bodies are knackered and they're probably thinking, no, I don't really want another time zone for 1 week of the year to then come back for the Davis Cup. It's not ideal.
Speaking of Nick Kyrgios and injury, because that's what we were talking about all of 5 minutes ago before we got sidetracked, he says he still sees himself as a top 10 player. He says he's not bothered about the fact he's not going to be seeded at the US Open, and that was, it was one worry about pulling out the singles in Atlanta. He could have picked up a lot of points and moved his way up the rankings a bit, because as you mentioned, George, he didn't get those ranking points for reaching the final at Wimbledon. I mean, how concerned, as someone, if you were in Nick Kyrgios' camp, I mean, God help you if you were, how concerned would you be by not being seeded? Because, he's played a decent amount of tennis, but he's already had multiple injury concerns this summer, and if you do get seeded, it gives you 2 easier matches in theory in the first 2 rounds, whereas he now knows he's going to play a seeded player almost certainly in round 1 or round 2 of the US Open, and that's going to, if he wants to win a Grand Slam, and like he reached the Wimbledon final, this is now what we're talking about. Like, we're not talking about, it'd be great if Nick Kyrgios got to another semi-final. No, absolutely not. We're saying we want Nick Kyrgios to win a Grand Slam. We may not. But if that's the kind of ceiling you're talking about for him, he has to do it without dropping early sets.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one with Nick now, because I think this particular US Open, I'd almost be less bothered about the seeding to a degree. And I say that meaning, Zverev isn't there. Nadal, we don't know if he'll 100% be there or what condition he's in. Djokovic doesn't seem like he's there. So you kind of, if all that happened, you're looking at Medvedev, Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, Casper Ruud, top 4 seeds. Now, Casper Ruud, if Nick Kyrgios falls in his section of the draw, you'd back Nick Kyrgios to be able to beat him on a hard court, as well as Ruud's played this year.
Also, popcorn emoji, because they don't exactly get on.
Yeah. And then you're looking at the next section. It's Rublev, Auger-Aliassime, Sinner, Hurkacz, all good players, but 50-50 toss-ups with Kyrgios, really. So I agree with you. It would be a lot better if he was seeded, but I don't see the depth as much now for a guy like Kyrgios that I'm automatically worried. That said, I don't know if the US Open suits him as a tournament that I can think he can win. I don't.
Why not?
It is typically, I don't know. It can be a little bit slow. It's a bit of a funny one, the US Open. It can be like a really feverish atmosphere, which I don't actually think feeds into him always that well. Okay. So a big night session there can really, it's a pretty intense cauldron. I'm not saying it would be on Arthur Ashe straight away, but in the kind of latter matches, it would be kind of fever pitch in there. It
can be pretty humid that time of year as well, which makes it slow.
Yeah, exactly. They're not the quickest conditions. Like, Australia suits him way more as a hard court than the US Open, I think. Yeah. And he has done better results there. It's not to say he can't do well there, but US Open Medvedev is a much better player there than the Australian Open, and that's saying that despite him reaching the final. It's a slower court, it's harder to hit through, and I don't see Kyrgios beating a Medvedev necessarily on that court, but I could see him doing it at Australia at Wimbledon.
Yeah, it's a weird set of conditions, the US Open, and even in the women's side they use quite a different ball. I know that's been talked about before in the context of Ash Barty, and how I know Tizzer always said she would never win the US Open because the ball just didn't suit her at all, and it's bouncier, I think. I don't know, Calvin will talk better about it, but
yeah. And look, we've spoken a lot about him during this year in terms of everything that needs to go right for him to reach a Grand Slam final. We sort of said in Miami, didn't we? He's playing really well. That's the first thing he needs. He's been fit and seemingly kind of managing his schedule quite well. He needs to avoid a total meltdown that stops him tanking a match, which he has done at Wimbledon, but there were still a few moments where it could have spiraled. But I think the fitness point probably ties into the conditions at Wimbledon. He wasn't playing that many long matches. Even his 5-setter barely went over 3 hours, did it? I think. So, look, he will need to be more physically robust. He seems to be fairly sensible with the knee and what he's doing now, but I don't know if he got into lots of grindy matches against, whatever, Bautista and Agut and then Rublev and then Medvedev or something, that would be a tough style of player for him to just keep going through and not get relentlessly bored, in his own words. And by bored, I mean someone wearing him down and having more competitive grit.
And he will, of course, be playing doubles with Thanasi Kokkinakis, as I mentioned. Thanasi, who also had... Nick Kyrgios had an interesting singles result because he didn't play at all. Thanasi Kokkinakis had an interesting singles result in Atlanta because he lost to Andres Martin, who was making his ATP Tour singles debut. He's from a town called Flowery Branch in Georgia, which might be one of my favourite names of any place ever. It's in the metropolitan area of Gainesville, I'm reliably informed, which I seem to think was quite important in the last US election. That's all I can really tell you about. It's quite a swingy part of Georgia, I think. Anyway, not the point. He beat Thanasi Kokkinakis, and then, am I right in saying, George, that he then called Kyrgios the GOAT?
I think that's exactly right. I was kind of hoping Calvin would be on at this point because I was wondering if he knows about Andres Martin. I think I'm right. He's a collegiate player.
Okay.
So
we'll put a
Calvin
pin in that.
Sometimes has his feelers out in the US college system, doesn't he? Because quite a few Brits go over there and I think kind of feed back.
Well, I'm reliably
It was a great
informed.
result. Good score line, wasn't it? Was it 2-3, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good result. I think we forget that Thanasi has played to a very high level in the singles game because I think more often than not we just think of him as Nick's doubles partner, which is obviously pretty harsh, but he has played some very decent singles tennis.
He was a brilliant singles player. I mean, and he still produces big match wins at Australian Opens and other big events. And he's a player who's had tremendous difficulty with injury that's really curbed that talent. But yeah, he's.
Do you know that his best Grand Slam result is at the French Open? That's the most surprising thing about Thanasi Kokkinakis.
I did not know that. Was that third round?
Third round. It's the only time he's ever been to the third round of Grand Slam. In the 2015 French Open, he beat Basilashvili and Bernard Tomic and then lost to Djokovic. Anyway, it's just one of those completely pointless, unhelpful and weird stats, but maybe indicates that injury has hampered him pretty significantly. Atlanta, incidentally, in the singles, was won by Alex de Minaur, who beat Jenson Brooksby. Jenson Brooksby, who's run to the final, was significant for beating Francis Tiafoe and then sort of half-heartedly mocking his LeBron James silence celebration, which, I don't know, Jenson Brooksby is just the weirdest guy as far as I can tell. Is he quite unpopular?
No, honestly, I don't know enough about his social circles, but he does just seem to have a bit of a weird edge to him sometimes, doesn't he? I struggle to get a proper read on him. I don't know him that well, admittedly. He's kind of, he's only 21, isn't he? So he wasn't really kind of bursting through on the tour.
I watched him practice at Queen's with, that lefty guy, Bryden Klein, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And Brooksby obviously doesn't really like the grass, he doesn't really know it very well, albeit he did get to the third round of Wimbledon. But, Klein's obviously a pretty wily operator, and they were just practicing, and it was a hot day, it was a really hot day. And all Brooksby for about 20 minutes, the only words he said were so physical. So physical. He just kept turning to his coach and being like, so physical. So physical. And I was like, there must be more to this. But he literally said almost nothing else for the 20 minutes that I watched him practice. But I do think he's a proper tennis nerd, and he does play weird tennis. But, it's a good result for him to get to a final there. Another really good result for Alex de Minaur, who I went to the race and expected to see him, flying up there. I mean, he's 18th in the race, but he's having a sort of quietly pretty handy year, isn't he?
Yeah, he's doing well. I mean, again, he's another one who's probably missed out on those Wimbledon points in terms of pushing him up a little bit higher. But 6 titles for de Minaur. That's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. He's still a pretty young guy.
I might get this completely wrong, but isn't that the same number that David Goffin's got? In fact, and I have double checked it, and it is the same number that David Goffin's got.
Same number as Jannik Sinner as well.
Which is a lovely segue into the result in Umag, which I put Umag in the category of Bustad, Gustad, Justad, Justad, Tustad, and Umag. Of these just bizarre European clay court tournaments to go on after Wimbledon. It should be said that Umag was a bit stacked.
It was,
as the final absolutely demonstrates. Carlos Alcaraz against Jannik Sinner. They were the top 2 seeds, in fairness, and I hadn't heard of either of the blokes that they beat in the semi-finals, so there's maybe something there. 6-7, 6-1, 6-1, Jannik Sinner beat Carlos Alcaraz. It was amazing to see on social media, which I admit is a terrible lens through which to view anything, people writing off Carlos Alcaraz after that defeat, very similar to the way they wrote off Jannik Sinner over the last 2 years, I would suggest. having had his big breakthrough and then a bit of a plateau. This is a match we expect to see in a lot more finals, isn't it?
I hope so. I think it could be a really good rivalry, and it's. I don't want to say good, but it's encouraging to me that Sinner's actually winning some of these matches right now, because there was a bit of a sense, wasn't there, that Alcaraz is so far ahead of everyone else that no one's going to challenge him. And the fact you've got someone as contemporary beating him a couple of times, I still think long run Alcaraz is the guy to beat and has more about his game that will develop further. But Sinner has so many big weapons, can hit through anyone, and he feels to me a little bit more resilient, Sinner, I think, from the last few months. I know he had that. He's obviously had a bit of time with Darren Cahill and stuff like that. I don't know exactly what's working for him, what's not working for him per se, but I just sense there's a little bit more belief after that dip. And, on the other hand, Alcaraz has also got to learn that you don't get everything your own way at the top level of the tour. And, it's okay, he had some losses earlier in the year, but he was top dog really this season when Nadal wasn't around. And that stalled slightly since the French Open. Still getting to finals, still doing well, but he was unbeaten, I think, in finals before that. So he's now lost back-to-back finals to young guys who want to be pushing him in the future. That bodes well for the game, I think.
Yes, for sure. It's also Jannik Sinner's first ever win over a top 5 player. Carlos Alcaraz is, I think, now at number 4 in the world, but he was number 5 when that match was played. There's one interesting stat I thought, just looking at it. I was comparing it to all Sinner's other top 5 matches. And in terms of first serve percentage, it was actually one of his lower ones. I think he was first serve percentage at like 57%, but winning a lot, which would suggest that he is maybe hitting his serve a bit bigger and, hitting a few more risky serves, which I do think, and Calvin often talks about Jannik Sinner having, one game plan, and you do think getting someone like Darren Cahill into your corner, there's a lot Darren Cahill can do, but he's not going to let you go into a match with only one game plan. He's a guy who can build you lots of different plans and help you with different looks, and I do wonder whether that's going to be the big thing that we see from Jannik Sinner over the next... Because let's face it, he's good on clay, but we think he's very good on hard court as well, and he's now got 6 months of hard court tennis.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was going to kind of say that. I mean, I always thought Sinner's best slam would probably be the US Open for his really good ball striking ability to hit through people really well on that slower surface. It felt like that would really suit him in the long run. But his best performances I've seen have actually come on the clay. Like, I thought his match against Nadal a couple of years ago was probably his breakthrough match in terms of showing, okay, I can really mix it with the top guys. And this is another really, really impressive win. And, Alcaraz hasn't... This was the first match he'd lost where he's been a set-up. He's been a pretty ruthless operator when he gets his nose in front, as, guys like Federer have been throughout their career as well. So this, another really impressive result for Sinner, and one that hopefully sparks a glorious rivalry over the years.
Yeah, and I think I do wonder how much, and I would be interested to, because I know Sinner, he's a tennis nerd and he loves thinking about the game, but I'd be interested to know what he thinks now about that defeat to Djokovic at Wimbledon, where he was 2 sets up, and what he thinks is different about himself now, if that makes any sense. Because a lot of people could go and lose that match and then have a really awful couple of months where they're just like, oh, I'm not worth it, I'll never be able to compete at the top level. But to kind of bounce back and turn up to a final like this against someone like Alcaraz, I think that shows a bit of mental fortitude.
Yeah, and the obvious comparison is Tsitsipas, really, isn't it? He was absolutely flying to the French Open final, felt like he was going to win it, and then he really struggled for the kind of months after that. So, yeah, look, I think the good thing for Sinner about that result is that Djokovic has done that to quite a few people over the last 2 years. It's becoming less of a shock and more of a, Novak's hustled us again, here we go. So, yeah, no major shame there. I mean, Calvin has magically arrived now, so maybe
it's not magic, George. It's just a Zoom call, mate. I send you both the link, and then eventually he clicks it. It's I know he's in Yorkshire, and we're constantly surprised that they've got, electric lights.
Yorkshire Day, by the way.
Is it Yorkshire Day?
It's Yorkshire Day.
Calvin, I assume that's nonsense.
It is Yorkshire Day. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what it is. The only thing that's happened in Yorkshire Day, 3 separate people have sent me that video of Sean Bean saying "bastard" 80 times in various shows he's been in. So I assume that's what Yorkshire Day is.
I'll be honest, I didn't realise it was Yorkshire Day until someone wished me Happy Yorkshire Day. My friend from Leeds, Katie.
Right.
So there you go.
I mean, I am technically a Yorkshireman by birth as well, so I should also.
I went to Leeds Uni, so we all have our great Yorkshire connections.
That's not George. Lots of very posh people go to Leeds University these days. It's very silly. I was actually born there and grew up in the county, no less. Anyway, neither here nor there. Calvin, we were just talking about Jannik Sinner, one of your favourite topics, and I was remarking that beating Carlos Alcaraz in the final of UMAG, which is an absurd tournament, obviously, that goes without saying, it's his first ever win against a top 5 player, which feels like an important moment and feels like another feather in Darren Cahill's enormous cap.
Yeah, he's done pretty well. I mean, is Sinner still the only? Is Alcaraz still the only top 5 player he's ever beat, and he's beaten twice?
Yeah, he hasn't beaten him twice. Oh, sorry,
he hasn't beaten him twice as a top 5.
As a top
yes,
5
exactly.
Player,
yeah. He's the only top 5 player at the time who he has beaten.
Having said that, I think we all know. I'm going on. He was one of the best 5 players in the world when Sinner beat him last time.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, and it is a rivalry that we hope to see much more of over the next 10 years. I mean, realistically, that's what we're talking about here. Possibly 15, possibly 20. I don't know. By the time Jannik Sinner's 40, that might be a normal age for a tennis player. Like that just might be that's what we expect of players.
True.
Anyway, moving on. Talking actually of people aging or not aging, Roberto Bertis Agut won a title this week in Kitzbühel, which, to be honest, is a place I more associate with World Cup skiing events than tennis, but that's neither here nor there. It's what you get in late July in the tennis world. He beat Mizolic in the final. I just can't really get my head around the shape of Roberto Bautista Agut's career. Like, he just...
say the shape of his head or something then. I was like, what?
No, it's just like, he just doesn't go away. Like, no fair play to him. I mean, he's 34... and he just keeps making finals of 250s and picking up 250 titles. Like, that's his second of the year. It's his third final. I don't know. Just kind of made me think weird things. Who's got a really loud beeping noise coming through their mic? That's George. Yeah, what's going on? Is someone hoovering? Oh,
washing machine.
The washing machine. I'd shut the door, George. That usually helps. This is the Love Tennis podcast with expert soundproofer George Belshaw.
Well, I said I'd leave the door open because my girlfriend wanted to move some things from one room to the other, but she's now turned on the washing machine, which isn't conducive to great recording. Can I just say as well, just focusing back on Bautista Agut a second, I was just having a quick scan before we started about kind of the race this year and just where people are. He's 16th, which, is fine. I mean, pretty good actually when you consider that's one place behind Cam Norrie, who I think we're all in agreement is doing pretty well at the minute.
Yeah.
But I was most interested, is Djokovic not going to qualify for the ATP finals? If he doesn't play the US Open, he genuinely I don't think he's going to get there. He's not going to play in the US tournaments, is he?
He's currently 10th in the race. He is 400 points away from the cutoff. It's quite hard to see how he does qualify, to be honest. Because, I mean, look, he says he hopes to still play the US Open. I think we're all pretty agreed that's blooming unlikely at this point. Like, barring a change of policy in the next 3 weeks that is not only decided in the next 3 weeks, but is then enacted in the next 3 weeks. Which, to be honest, I don't know US politics that well, but I really can't see it happening. Barring that, he's not going to play the US Open. He obviously can't play any of the ATP events in the US either, because, just to restate this, because people sometimes seem to forget it, the USCA have not banned Novak Djokovic They are perfectly happy for him to play the tournament. He's not allowed in the country. He's not eligible for a visa. Just to make that perfectly clear to everyone. Because I have seen... Actually, no, I don't want to go into the rabbit holes I've been down this week. I've done pretty well over the last 10 days to unplug from like work life. But I didn't delete Twitter off my phone, and that was a real error, if I'm totally honest. But the point is, you're right, George, because there's not that much going on that he can play after the US Open to actually qualify.
I think the bigger question would be is like how bothered he can be to try and qualify. Because don't get me wrong, if Djokovic wanted to qualify by virtue of points, he could go and roll 500s at the back end of the season, like a motivated Djokovic.
There's only a limited number of weeks in the year, George.
There's you've got Vienna, don't you, and you've got what are they doing instead of China this year?
Well, they haven't really confirmed the Masters.
Tashkent, isn't it? Tashkent 500 instead of Shanghai.
But basically, they haven't replaced it with a Masters event. So
there actually is a bit of a deficiency of points.
Yeah, so there's actually not that many 500s in the second half of the year. So there's Tokyo. That's
Paris Masters, of course, which he could easily win.
And two of the 500s are in the same week. Of the 4 500s, he could only win 2 of them. So it wouldn't be that easy, Calvin.
I mean, for what I find it strange that they've not put another Masters on. Do you think it wouldn't be that difficult to put one on somewhere? I'm sure, even as bad as it is, I'm sure one of the Middle Eastern countries or Tashkent or someone would have put 500 on if they wanted to. They're never really struggling for money, are they?
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I'm not good on like exactly what makes you a Masters event, what you have to qualify for, but it needs like 3 stadiums over 5,000, I think. And so that's obviously that, they could relax the rules for that though, right? Like you could just say, but maybe I guess the financials don't really add up then, and that's what it comes down to in the end. Like the reason those stadium minimums exist is because you've got to make them money, and I suppose they probably don't.
The other thing I was going to say was, as funny as it is that Djokovic is having these issues getting in, and I do find it quite funny, if for no other reason than it winds up his weird fans. But it is going to make a bit of a mess of the ranking system and the seeding system for tournaments. Like we're going to be going in next year, and like Djokovic could be like not seeded, or he's already seeded. He's already going to be seeded 7 at the best.
Yeah.
If he gets in US Open, it's not going to be great for. It's one of those, isn't it? You always use this analogy that like it's just going to mess the tournament up because it's all well and good. Where it's like the FA Cup when like Cardiff make it to the semis and then have a great win, and then you've got an FA Cup final that's like Man City against Cardiff. Yeah, and it's just rubbish, and that's what's going to happen with tennis, I think.
But then
it's like Wigan.
It's not like Wigan, George. It's never like Wigan. I don't know if you've been to Wigan, George. I know you went to university in Leeds, so you're very, well measured with the North. But the thing is, you say that, Calvin, and you're right. But like this happens every year with Rafa Nadal. Like you should see, like if you look at like the number that Rafa Nadal has been seeded at various different Grand Slams, and like he's very rarely actually seeded in the top 2, which is where he should be, during his peak years. Because he so often doesn't have the ranking points, or he hasn't played, or he's had 4 months out with injury. And the same with Federer to an extent as well. So, yes, I think you're right, but like it is just a bit going to be one of those things, I think, George.
The bigger thing that will be messed up for Djokovic, of course, is this ludicrous target Goran Ivanisevic has set this week. I don't know if you've seen this.
Tell us more, George.
He's claimed, now bearing in mind, as it stands, Djokovic is unable to play the Australian Open and US Open for the foreseeable. They're targeting 30 Grand Slam titles before he retires. So he's on what, 21 at the minute?
I mean, even if he's going to win 3 a year, 3 a year is like, that would be one of the greatest runs of all time, to win 9 of the next 12. Even notwithstanding his like visa eligibility, like even
35,
even if you went and got like a Johnson & Johnson jab tomorrow, it would still be spectacular to win 9 of the next 13 Grand Slams. And what is he now? 34? Or is he 35?
He's 35. Yeah.
So he'd be 38 by the time he knocked off, or 39 even by the time he knocked off the last one. I mean, 30's just. I mean, Goran says a lot, but he doesn't. It's weird for him to like put that number out there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I asked Goran when he won Australia a few years ago. I think the one when he hammered Nadal. I was like, you must be thinking he can pass Serena, like based on the rate he was going, and that at the time that was like, oh, Goran was like, yeah, I think we can, but most people were like, well, that's a really long way away. But having 30, that would be absolutely, totally ludicrous, even without the issues he's facing getting into any of the tournaments. That's going to be the biggest problem, of course.
Calvin, have you targeted a number of challenger titles for Henry to win by the end of his career? Have you mapped that out yet?
No, I'm hoping there are not many challenger titles. Well, I hope there are, but I'm hoping that's not the limit on it. I'm kind of hoping. I mean, I already have 2, so maybe another. Fine. I guess, I think we challenge. If they won another 3 or 4, they're probably out of challengers.
Yeah. Oh. Am I right in staying there playing in the US tonight, or are they playing tomorrow night?
They only got there this morning, so I hope it's not tonight. I think they've requested a Wednesday start. Whether that's granted or, but it'll be tomorrow at the earliest. They're not playing today.
Very good. Out in Lexington, Patton and Cash are number 3 seeds in the challenger there. Are they? And they're playing 3 tournaments out there. Is that right?
No, they're playing more now. They're going 3 before the US Open. So they're doing 4 before the US Open. They're doing Lexington, Chicago, Vancouver, and Granby, and then a 2-week break for the US Open, and then they're staying out and doing, I think, another 2 in North and South Carolina.
You're still listening to the Love Tennis podcast with me, James Gray, George Belshaw, and Calvin Betton, who was, just before the break, listing his player Henry Patton's extensive US schedule. Calvin, we'd got as far as the US Open, and then there's more.
Yeah, then they go. It gets a bit weird, the schedule then, because I think it's somewhere in South Carolina, followed by one in Ohio, followed by one in North Carolina. So whoever's doing the scheduling on that has not looked at a map of the United States of America.
Well, I feel like the attitude to domestic travel in the United States is quite different. They seem quite happy just to fly around everywhere and rack up the air miles. Yeah,
and weirdly, they don't have any trains in America, really, do they?
No,
which is really odd.
You can't go sort of interstate. It's really strange. Very strange indeed.
But yeah, and then Luke, my other player, of course, is going to do 3 challenges in Poland, Mallorca, and Cassis.
Ooh, lovely. And are you on that trip?
I think I may go to 1 or 2 of them with Luke. I'm not going to America. The flights to America are extortionate at the minute.
Yeah, so, the pound, it's complicated without getting boring by the fact the pound is so weak at the moment. Like, the pound to dollar rate is currently the same as the pound to euro rate, which is absolutely horrendous.
I think they're expensive anyway, because one of the American lads who was over playing tournaments over here has just flown back, and he couldn't believe how expensive it was for him. So yeah.
There you go. Cost of fuel hitting everyone. Cost of living crisis in tennis. That's a story that needs writing. Now let's move on. We talked earlier about Atlanta. The next stop on the ATP and in fact the WTA Tour is Washington this week. It's a really tasty looking draw. We've already had a couple of matches completed. I think the biggest one, and I want to really celebrate this. We try not to celebrate things too much on this podcast, but Kyle Edmund winning his first ATP level match since the US Open 2020 is definitely something that deserves to be celebrated. He beat Yosuke Watanuki 6-4, 7-6, 10-8 in that second set tiebreak. For people who don't know, Kyle Edmund, of course, who has been British number 1, he has been an Australian Open semi-finalist. He's been absolutely plagued by injury over the last, I suppose 3 years, really. Various knee problems that no one could really quite work out what they were at one point, and lots of hesitancy over making a full comeback. But he has played, I think, now 2 tournaments, I should say, this summer. One a challenger out in Winnipeg, where he won a couple of matches, and now he's playing in Washington on his protected ranking, and he's picked up a win in the first round. Calvin, you'll have been on court with Kyle and in and around Kyle, as they say in football parlance. I mean, this has obviously been a pretty long journey for a guy who's had to work pretty hard for it.
Yeah, and his coach Colin Beach is a good friend of mine, and I know it's been a tough couple of years for both of them, and I'm just so happy for both of them that he's back and he's competing. And I watched his match earlier, and he looked pretty good, did Kyle? Bit rusty, match rusty, but there was no sort of physical signs of any issues, and was hitting huge still as he always did.
I thought he looked from the numbers anyway, like he was serving huge as well. I mean, the serve numbers look really big.
Yeah, he lost his serve once in the first game of the second set. He just won the first set. And that kind of happens when you're a bit match rusty, that kind of thing. So he just won a big first set and then immediately lost his serve to love.
Yeah.
But then got his act together and ended up winning from there. But yeah, like I say, he looked good. I mean, it was quite funny because there was literally no one in the stadium other than Beach. And maybe some of his opponent's team, but there was literally no one in there.
He now plays Dan Evans, which is quite a funny little draw. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, he obviously knows Evo very well.
Yeah, he will, and then Evo's used Beach a bit to travel with him when his own coach can't go. So that's a bit of. I mean, that's just. I just hate those situations because it's just so awkward for everyone involved, and you rarely get a good match out of it. And I don't imagine that anybody involved in that match will enjoy that.
Has Carl got a decent chance?
Yeah, it's always tough to know where players are at.
Of course.
You know, you'd think, I mean, Evo's got to be favourite for sure, but you never know where Kyle's at. And I actually think Kyle has a decent head-to-head against Evo as well. I know he's beat him in a couple of Challenger finals, maybe.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, sorry, George, go on.
I was just saying, I mean, in terms of level, it's hard to know exactly. I mean, obviously, him being out the game so long, any win is absolutely brilliant at this level. But he couldn't have asked for a much better kind of return match, could he? I mean, it's a guy who's, I don't think, been above the top 170 or something. So, you know, that was like a really good first step. Now this is a good test. But you know, Dan's had some odd results this year as well. He's been susceptible to some bad losses, and Carl's got a big game. You know, hits really well. If he's striking is on song, then why not? But yeah, I'd probably favour Evans, given how difficult it is to return after years of not playing.
It's kind of weird. I mean, you know, Carl Edmund was top 15 in the world. I mean, I appreciate it was a slightly weird moment in time. You know, that kind of odd 2018 spot where you know, Murray had been out for a while. He just started getting injured. Djokovic had surgery. But nevertheless, I mean, Calvin, do you think he could get back there again?
Yeah. I don't see why not. It's not like the game's moved on since he was there. I mean, the only thing I'd say is that he'd started to struggle a bit before the injury.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it hit him then, but I don't know how much the injury was to do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say there's no reason why he can't. Look, there's some spots in the top 20 going to be opening up soon, and some players are going to have to step into them, and I think Kyle's as well placed as anybody if he can stay injury free.
I guess we talk a lot about like how players are going to push to their ceiling and beyond it, and one thing he's got that we often say you can't learn is weapons. Like, he hits the ball huge, and like, you know, as you say, if he can stay fit, that's always going to be with him. So
yeah.
We wish Carl well. I mean, I think everyone would when you know how much he's been through over the last 2 years.
Yeah, for what it's worth, because I know everyone keeps asking me loads of questions in the mailbag, so I really value my opinion. My personal feeling was that Carl had really hit his ceiling beforehand. So I'm not saying he can't get back there. I don't see him going higher than that. This coming from the man who said Cam Norrie.
I was going to say, how many times has Cam Norrie smashed the George Belshaw ceiling? It's at least 3.
But I think the thing I would say about Kyle there, I know Calvin said the game hasn't moved on, but I think what has happened is the generation of guys who are coming through behind Kyle are now a lot stronger than they were. That was a bit of a gap time in some ways, even though you obviously had the big four mucking around. There is bigger strength in guys like Medvedev, Zverev, Tsitsipas kicking around, who I think are all like comfortably stronger than Kyle. And at the same time, you had like Dimitrov around there as number 3. Do you know what I mean? Like it was a little bit of a gap in the market.
The only thing I'd say to that, George, is that Sinner is winning titles. Sinner's a legitimate top 10 player, and he's similar to Kyle in the way they play. They're both big hitting players who, to be fair, don't have much of a plan B. They're both big strikers.
I think Sinner hits the backhand way better than Kyle, though. Kyle's backhand improved a lot, but that's a good shot. Like I think that's
but I'd argue that
Sinner, to be fair.
I'd argue that Kyle's forehand is probably bigger than Sinner's, not by loads, but he hits it harder, I think.
But I think for me, the backhand gap between Sinner and Edmund is far bigger than the forehand gap.
Sinner's probably but I'm talking about game style. I'm not talking about sort of how who's better at what. Although I don't think there's as much in it overall as what you're saying. That doesn't mean I don't think Sinner's a better player, because there's other things that come into it, mentality, that kind of thing, which, Kyle's a good mentality. But I think both of them are big ball strikers who don't have much variation, and neither of them move unbelievably well.
The thing I would say about Kyle, as you say, kind of in terms of mentality and stuff, I mean, he will have a big point to prove now as well. Like he is a bit of a forgotten man in British tennis. You never know which way that's going to go. I mean, there's two flip sides to that, isn't it? There's do you trust your body, or is it I'm making up for lost time? That's often the forks in the road at this stage after a massive injury like that.
Yeah, and also we come back to one of my favourite topics is when you're saying Sinner has a better backhand. What do I always say? That the most pointless good shot, most pointless big weapon in tennis is.
His forehand's all right as well, though, to be fair to Jannik.
Forehand's all right. I don't think his forehand's any better than Kyle's.
Well,
Kyle does have a big forehand, to be fair.
Here's hoping that Kyle uses his projected ranking. Or he's in the US Open, and he's certainly on the entry list. Here's hoping he draws Jannik Sinner in the second round. That'd be ideal. And we can settle this once and for all, like men. Moving on swiftly to Emma Raducanu, who is obviously in the draw in Washington this week. She is the second seed in the singles, I think I'm right in saying, and she's not seeded in the doubles, where she's playing with Clara Tauson. Now, we'll maybe come on to that in a moment, because there's other interesting developments with Emma Raducanu. She has picked up Dmitry Tursunov for a spell as her coach, who was working with Annette Kontaveit, and then split with Annette Kontaveit. Have I got that right? Have I made that up? Someone correct me if I'm wrong, please. Right. No, I was right, because then Annette Kontaveit then picked up Torben Beltz, who had previously been Emma Raducanu's coach. So the great WTA coaching roundabout goes on. The slightly amusing thing is that last year Dmitry Tursunov said in an interview that if you did get the Raducanu job, you'd just be terrified about when you were going to get fired. He is now, it would seem, terrified about when he's going to get fired.
Well, he's not even he's back in the famous trial period, isn't he? I think he's in a trial period and got other commitments in the first 4 weeks. I mean, it's just another. Oh, I don't want to get accused of. I'll maybe take Calvin's role of criticising Raducanu this time, but I just don't get this again. I don't, and there's nothing against Tursunov as a coach. It's just the idea again of starting a new trial and not having someone who's available for 6 weeks in the build up to a Grand Slam. Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't know what she's doing. At the end of the day, look, the bottom line in all this stuff is always going to be something to do with money. That's the reason these coaches are flipping around. I'm sorry. I just don't believe they can seriously believe this is a good, sustainable route. It's just nonsense.
I mean, it's sustainable for the bank account. Yeah, I think that's what they see. I think. I mean, maybe Calvin, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I suppose if you've just split with a player, you're probably facing the prospect of maybe a few months without work, and Camp Raducanu come along, and you're like, well, it's unlikely to be a long-term commitment, and I'll make a whatever figure sum for the next couple of months, while I'm also kind of shopping around a bit and keeping my eye in. Does that sound realistic?
Yeah. Tursunov will do it. She's a good player. Any coach, yeah, I say any coach will. We discussed it before. I'm not sure they would, but yeah, she's a good player, and he's a coach. Your coach has got to work.
Yeah,
It's getting a bit boring now. It's like just this same thing, isn't it? It's like I guarantee the next coach she sets on after Tursunov, they'll come out and they'll go, it's only a trial basis.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually not sure it is all about the money. I'm sure it factors in the money, but I think there's a level of arrogance as well. This thing that we keep hearing that no coach can match Emma's tennis IQ, and she likes to ask them questions, and that she likes to ask them questions that she already knows the answer to, and see if they answer it correctly. Like, all right, whatever.
I'd be interested really, because obviously Tursunov spent a decent amount of time with Kontaveit, like I think a year, and was previously with Arina Sabalenka. In terms of personality, I don't see much sort of synergy between like Raducanu, Kontaveit, and even Sabalenka, to be honest. Like, Kontaveit and Sabalenka strike me as quite easygoing, and the kind of thing that we hear from most people about working with Raducanu, she's quite intense, and I don't know. I think so much of coaching relationships at any level, like, yes, there's technical stuff, and again, Calvin, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you always do. But so much of it is about having like a positive working relationship, and like having similar styles, I think, to just like your approach to life and your approach to tennis. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does, but this just happens too much. Yeah, you're right. You got to gel with the person and that kind of thing, but it's just all the time, isn't it? It's like it's happening all the time, and you'd think, like, what amazes me is that no one in the camp has gone, look, we really need to settle down now on this one. We need to start doing something a bit different. Let's make a big call on this, and let's go with it. But no, here we are, exactly the same.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that at the moment, for the most part, the kind of consensus, the media consensus, the social media consensus, while there is a lot of criticism, I think the general direction of travel of the public is mostly positive still. Like, she's still less than a year since she won the US Open. But I think if she loses second round of US Open, and we go to Australia next year, and she's maybe got another coach, which isn't that unlikely, and all of a sudden because she's going to take a big hit in the rankings as well, all of a sudden she's not seeded at events and things like that. I think then you might see the tide turn pretty quickly, and then you might actually think, if you're within the camp, I don't know, it depends how much you care what people say, we know that they do care a bit what people say, but I don't know.
They care hugely what people say. Massively.
Yeah. I mean, I do have a degree of sympathy with Raducanu in terms of the whole... she's come out this week, hasn't she? And she said, yes, actually, I've been thinking a lot about like where I am for my age and my experience on the tour, that this has been nowhere near as bad. So I thought, I know Calvin's mantra in this is, once you've won a Grand Slam title, it doesn't matter. You adapt or whatever. But there is a part of me that does have that sympathy with her. I think the big thing for me is like the chopping and changing the coaching she got away with last summer, because she got rid of Nigel Sears after Great Wimbledon, went for Andrew Richardson, won the US Open. Yeah. It was working, but that we've had. And as we said last year, we've got such a small amount of time to really know and understand Raducanu at the top level. It was hard to, at the time it was like, oh, maybe she has learnt this new magical way where you pick and choose coaches for a few months. Now we're looking over the last, if you take the US Open to now, a year's time, you're asking me what's developed in Raducanu's game, what's really stronger now, where she got better tactically, where she got better stroke-wise. I'm really struggling to tell you anything. And that to me is a big worry. And obviously, we can say she might have performed above her level and she had a good run at the US Open, and players do get into really hot streaks. But there is that degree of concern that if we're taking her at face value of where we're improving, for a player as good as she is, I don't think it's necessarily good enough to be like, okay, well, I'm getting used to the rigors of the tour. That's fine. But where's the improvement in the game? Where's the sign that the things that haven't been going well is really improving? I've not seen that personally this year. And that's where I think she'd really settle from that long-term voice who's working with it consistently rather than that stop-start. Here's a new voice. Let's try that. Let's actually have a slower incremental development.
You've not seen it, George, because you just don't have the tennis IQ that Emma did.
That's probably true.
None of us do. Yeah. No, but look, I also think, joking aside, the stuff about the asking of questions that she already knows in inverted commas or in brackets, what she thinks is the right answer to catch them out. That's not a good basis to start a coaching relationship.
No,
it's that starting anything from a premise of they don't know as much as I do is never going to work out well.
Yeah,
and that seems to be the position with every coach on the planet. Look, her dad thinks that every tennis coach is rubbish. I don't see how that's ever going to move away from that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, a starting point in relationships is really important. I talked about the relationships, that you have to build. And yeah, if you start from that position of kind of animosity almost, and you've got to prove to me that X, Y, or Z, or you've got to prove to us, I should say. I was just going to make one point that.
Why? Sorry, James. Just can I nip in? Why would it? Obviously, you talk to coaches before you set them on for a trial period, or before you start working. Why wouldn't you just do it then? Why is the actual work on court when you start trying to catch the coach out?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose at that point, when you're thinking about like granular detail of the relationship, like we're relying on secondhand sources and things can get construed in different ways. But yeah, I mean, you're right, of course. Like if that were the case, then that would be really weird.
And I'll say that. Look, I seem to say this a lot. I feel like I'm having a go. I'm not. I think she's a fantastic talent. She's obviously she's a Grand Slam winner, and every time I've been around her company, I find her a really nice girl, and I don't wish to criticize. I just think that she's not getting the best advice.
Yeah, we shall see how it turns out.
But that's just frustration, isn't it? I mean, frankly, we wouldn't really be bothered if this wasn't a player we thought could be really, really good and kind of a big kind of flag bearer for British tennis for a long time. And she will be either way. She's a Grand Slam champion. She's got a big presence in British sport, but it is kind of difficult to see what you perceive to be the wrong decisions. And again, we'll hold our hands up all the time and say we get things wrong all the time. But I'm struggling to see the body of evidence that in the last year, the decisions that have been taken have been to her benefit, and that's where the concern lies for me.
Indeed. Why is she playing doubles?
Well, she needs to improve her net game. So actually, that's one area there. That's probably the smartest thing I've seen anyone do all years. So that's Tursunov already, the best coach I've seen her have so far.
She incidentally just. For people who don't know, she's played almost no doubles to any kind of real competitive level. She obviously played a bit of Battle of the Brits doubles. She played, I think I'm right in saying she played Billie Jean King Cup out in Prague over Easter. She's played about 5 junior tournaments doubles, but otherwise very little of it. I mean, is that unusual, Calvin, or do you get players like that who don't even bother playing doubles like at junior level?
Yeah, if they're as good as she was, then a lot of players don't play it.
Yeah.
The main reason why a lot of players play in juniors is if they're not getting enough matches.
Yeah.
And 2, doubles counts towards your singles ranking in juniors.
I see.
It counts. You get a quarter of your doubles points count towards your singles ranking.
Right. Okay.
A lot of players will play that if they need to get the singles ranking up, but Emma was just winning everything anyway, so she never needed help getting the singles ranking up.
I see. Okay. Well, we'll see how she fares with Clara Tauson, another sort of quite similar big-hitting girl from the same, I think they're the same birth year as well, so they're the sort of same class, to use that Americanism. Lots of other British interest in Washington as well. Jack Draper is in the main draw on merit, on ranking, which I just thought worthy of note because I think it's probably the first time he's got into a tournament of that caliber on the basis of his ranking. Excuse me. which is kind of just a sign of how important those ranking points are to keep laddering your way up. Dan Evans, as I mentioned, is there. Some bloke called Andrew Barron Murray. I've not heard of him that much recently, but he is literally playing as we are recording. So we wish him the best of luck against Mikael Ymer. A decent draw on the men's side and on the women's side where both Serena and Venus Williams are playing. George, there's some video of them practicing together. You're making a face at me.
Serena actually in the draw? I couldn't spot her earlier. Maybe I totally missed her. I thought it was just Venus in the draw and she'd just been practicing.
That's actually a great question. I just saw her practicing, so I assumed that she was playing.
I don't think she's in the draw.
She's actually not in the draw, is she? Yeah, okay. But anyway, nevertheless, the thing I wanted to ask you about was the video of Venus and Serena practicing together. I actually thought they both looked all right, but maybe if you're both not playing very well, it just makes you both look a bit better.
I think it'll be interesting to see where Venus is at. It feels like I've not seen her play tennis for quite a long time. Serena, we kind of said it the other week, didn't we? I mean, it's good she's doing some warm-up events for the US Open. My gut feeling, she's not going to get anywhere near the level she needs to be at to really impact the tournament. And by that, I mean quarterfinals onwards. I think I'd expect a first 3-4 round loss there. But look, there's still big characters for the game. There's still people that will put bums on seats, and we're in last chance saloon for seeing a lot of these great players. So people will be rushing at every opportunity to get there and catch Serena's final farewell or Venus's final farewell, and whether they're going to announce that's happening this year, whether this is going to relight the fire for Serena to try and have a proper push for it next year, I don't know. But I'm not overly optimistic about either of their chances at a slam. I do wonder if they're just going to call it quits, to be honest, at the same time, just say see ya. But that's based on nothing other than random gut feeling, James.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, there's so many factors at play as well. Like, I don't know if Serena wants to have another child. For example, she obviously had a really traumatic birth the first time she started a family, so she might want to not push that later, have it sooner rather than later. That could play a role. She's obviously got the Margaret Court record to think about, and I do think that is still playing a big part in her thinking. Is she just thinks... I think she probably looks at people who are winning Grand Slams and thinks, I'm better than Elena Rybakina. I just need one of these runs through a Grand Slam, and I can do that twice. All I've got to do is keep turning up, play 6 events a year, and I must surely be able to win. And I'm not... I don't even think she's that wrong in that, to be perfectly honest. But
I think physically too much has gone now. She's just not match fit enough. I mean, just being perfectly honest. Do you think
it's that situation now where, if she played a full tour, she'd get injured far too much, and if she doesn't play a full tour, she's not match fit enough?
Yeah, I mean, look, I always remember, I think it was Leighton Hewitt once, in kind of talking about this in terms of Kyrgios. He was saying Kyrgios is 18 months off being match fit in terms of playing the tour regularly, being able to withstand the grind of it, and put your body through big situations that you can handle it in big moments. I mean, Serena must have a lot of fear in matches at the moment, in terms of, is my body going to hold up? She's had a lot of bad injuries over the last 3 or 4 years. I don't want to speculate on how much work she's putting in or not, but the camp, and by the camp I mean Muratoglu's always been pretty clear it wasn't at the level it was before.
Yeah, I
didn't see the signs that had changed at Wimbledon this year. Putting in a few events for the US Open's a better sign in terms of kind of respect's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, understanding the magnitude of what it takes to win a Grand Slam at the age of 40 is, you probably need some events in the year to kind of help build up to it, even acknowledging how good Serena was and still is. So yeah, I don't know, but it's hard to get back once you've lost it. I'm not saying she's totally lost it, but time does catch up with you, just with every great sports player.
Yeah. Athlete is the word you're looking for there, George.
Yeah. I started with sports, and I was like, I don't want to go either way there.
Sports player. She's always been a great sports player, though.
A sportiste.
Sportiste. Yes, very good. She, as I say, as I incorrectly said, she's not in action in Washington, but Venus is. She's in the draw, got a wild card there. We've got the men in action in Los Cabos. Daniel Medvedev, Cam Norrie playing down there. San Jose is the place to be if you want to watch tennis this week, though I would suggest. Absolutely stacked WTA draw. Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, Garbine Muguruza, Paula Badosa, Maria Sakkari, Ons Jabeur, Arina Sabalenka, Bianca Andreescu. Several of those may have lost already, in fact.
Gauff Osaka was due to be round 2 as well, so pretty...
Yeah, and may already be in the book, slated for the next day by the time, depending on when you listen to this. So certainly a match worth watching. I mean, of those names I've just rattled off, George, which do you think needs a decent run the most before the US Open?
I mean, the one that is really obvious to jump to is Osaka in terms of, it feels like she needs to kind of re-announce herself to the tour and get that fear factor back. But I'm actually going to go a bit more left field. I'll let Calvin do the obvious one with Osaka, and I'll do. I think Papadosa could really do with a good week. It feels like she's dipped quite a lot to me this year as a whole. I was getting kind of confident. I thought she'd be pushing slams much later than she is, and I'm now sensing a little bit of a stagnation. So I think she could do with a couple of decent results to get herself going again.
Unfortunately, you didn't get the right answer, which is Garbine Muguruza, who desperately needs a run.
I missed her off the list. We all know she needs a run.
It's actually it's actually sad. Like, it is genuinely sad what's happened to Muguruza over the last 6 months. And she, I've said a couple of times that I don't know but maybe there is something going on that we don't know. But actually, something she said on social media where she was just like, I keep losing and it's horrible and I hate it and I don't really know what to do, suggests to me that, much as there might be something going on, I'm not sure she knows what it is. So she probably needs a run. George has teed you up for the Naomi Osaka answer. I mean, I can't remember what your opinion is on Naomi Osaka when it comes to whether she's someone that needs matches or is she, that good and that kind of player that she can play one tournament, win one, lose one, and then she's ready?
No, if the draw's all right, I wouldn't say she desperately needs matches before the US Open. But the problem is with her ranking. Is she going to get seeded? Is she up there?
What a tremendous question.
No,
I doubt it.
I don't think she is.
She's number 40 in the world.
Yeah,
well, it's not impossible. A couple of match wins, yeah.
But even then, if you get seeded, if you get seeded 32, then you're looking at Swiatek maybe in the third round. And that's the problem. Were it not for that, I think she could beat anybody outside of the top 3 or 4 if she avoids them.
Yeah.
But I think in order to, if you want to compete against Swiatek at the US Open, whether that be in the third round or the final, I think we're going to need to see a bit of a run of form before then. And it's important for it's important for all those tournaments. The more time that Naomi Osaka is on the tennis court, the better it is for women's tennis and tennis in general.
Do you think Swiatek's game's moved on significantly since Osaka was dominating the hard courts, or is that level Osaka comfortably better than Swiatek?
If you can get somebody who hits the ball as hard as Osaka does and is as good as Osaka does, then it doesn't matter what anyone else's game's doing.
We shall see. As always, the great thing about a sports podcast, eventually we will see.
I think it's going back to George's one on Paula. I think what actually needs to happen for Paula is a boyfriend needs to get a job, because it's getting a bit Yoko Ono-ish, isn't it? I saw it in the flesh at Wimbledon, and it's and then I've seen a few people commenting about it on social media, and it is getting a bit weird now.
He is tremendously good looking.
He's phenomenally good looking, which makes you think he'd probably get a job.
He is a bad influence, maybe. Who knows? Speaking of tennis players and boyfriends and things, just a very brief congratulations, not that she will be listening, to Ash Barty, who has married her longtime partner, Gary Kissick, down in Australia in a private ceremony in Queensland earlier this month. So congrats to her. That's the kind of thing you can do when you're no longer playing professional tennis. You can plan and then actually execute a nice wedding, and you can announce it at your leisure without getting papped too badly. That's all we've got time for this week on the Love Tennis podcast with me, James Gray, along with George Belshaw and Calvin Betton. Please do leave us a rating or a review. Drop us a nice tweet at Love Tennis Pod on Twitter, or send us an email, lovetennispod@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. But most importantly, please do come back next week.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Versed is men's activewear that's built to be comfortable, functional, and stylish. Their versatile clothing is made from fabrics that flex and fit perfectly for any activity, whether it's at the gym or on the go. Versed is fit for living, and these wardrobe staples are sure to be your favorite things to wear. Versed is available at Dick's Sporting Goods, or get 15% off regular price items when you go to vrst.com and use the promo code podcast15, all in caps. That's podcast15, all capital letters.